أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعد. أما بعد, inshallah ta'ala, today we'll be completing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made easy for us, to review of what we have covered in the book that we have been studying, Riyaddus Salihin. We weren't able to complete the book. Actually, we weren't able to even get halfway. However, in our readings after Fajr, when we first came back in 2016, we used to read the book after Fajr, and we were able to cover more than half of the book. Then we started over. Alhamdulillah. We started over. Then we were only able to get through 11, 12, or 13 chapters or so. And so far we've covered, our review has covered the chapter of Al-Ikhlas and the chapter of At-Tawbah. And today, inshallah, we'll finish up with whatever we have the ability to finish, whatever time permits. So this chapter, the third chapter that we covered, was the chapter of As-Sabr. And As-Sabr is often translated as patience. Patience, and I don't know if that's the most effective translation. However, it's the one that is used most often. However, the definition of as-sabr is habs al-nafs, or to restrain oneself. To restrain oneself. That's as-sabr. When we're using as-sabr, when you find it used, or when you find the word used in the text of the Kitab and the Sunnah, it means to restrain oneself while obeying Allah and refraining from disobeying Allah, and refraining oneself while enduring the decree of Allah. And so, to restrain oneself upon the obedience of Allah, meaning that a person, irregardless as to his emotional state, his physical state, he will put the obedience of Allah, whether the command or performing a command or avoiding a prohibition, put that in the foremost, and that will supersede whatever it is that the person is feeling. And that is difficult. It is very difficult, especially in the times where our desires tell us to do something different. Like at the Fajr time, when we are sleeping, right? We want to continue sleeping. That's what we want to do. So getting up and making wudu with the cold water, or even if you have to make ghusl, for example, if you're in a situation where you have to make ghusl, you wake up, you say, I have to make ghusl. The water is cold, outside is cold. That requires some patience. It requires you to withhold yourself, restrain yourself from doing what your nafs, what your desires calls you to do, which is climb back into your warm bed, get underneath with your warm blanket, right, with your goose feather mattress, goose feather blanket, goose feather pillow, right, and everything is all warm, cozy. Outside of that, it's cold and it's freezing. The water's cold, and so you want to get back and be warm. But sabr is what allows you to go against what your soul, what your nafs desires, because you're restraining that desire, and you are doing what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered you. That's a sabr. When your desire tells you, I wanna lie to get out of trouble, I can just tell a lie and nobody will know the difference. Nobody will know. I can just say, nah, that wasn't me. And I won't get in trouble and nobody will know. That's what your nafs tells you, because if you tell the truth, you can get in trouble, you can hurt, somebody who's a friend, they may lose respect for you, or a lot of you're fearful of a lot of things. So what do? You lie. And that's easy. But lying is muharram. Actually, it's a major sin. Lying is a major sin. And so you want to lie because that's the easy way out. However, you restrain yourself from doing what you want to do, and then what you do is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered you to do. And this is a sabr. And from this we see that it is not a crime, or is not an act, or is not a violation for an individual to have a desire to do something that Allah is displeased with. I want to say that again. It is not a violation for a person to have a desire to do something that Allah is displeased with. That is not the violation. We are humans, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and we have desires. We have a nafs, right? We have a nafs. Inna nafsa la ammaratum bisu. Indeed, the nafs commands to do evil, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with this nafs, this desire, these ahwa, these inner desires that we have. Allah created that. And so the violation is not the presence of those desires. And sometimes there are people, there are individuals who lie to themselves. They tell themselves, I don't like XYZ. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't have a desire for that. I don't have a desire for that. Because for some strange reason, they have this belief that if they admit to certain desires that are present within them, then that in of itself is admittance to being a fasiq, or it's an admittance to being mufsid, it's admittance to being not righteous. When in reality, humans have desires, and it's not, if you found out that someone had a desire or had a thought or had a calling to do something that is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's not an indication that the person is not righteous. All that is an indication that the person is human. The issue and the violation comes when a person decides to act on that desire. When a person decides and chooses to act on that desire, that's when it becomes a violation. As the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Inna Allah tajawaza an ummati ma haddathat bihi anfusuhum ma lam ta'mal bihi aw tatakallam." The Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, indeed Allah has pardoned my ummah about what they speak about within themselves, as long as they don't act on it or speak of it. Right? And so a person may be in the Publix, right? And he looking for some item, it's hard to find. He ends up turning down the alcohol aisle. right? Now I've made that mistake. I'm looking for something. Where's the trash bag? I'm looking for the trash bag. Then all of a sudden I make a turn, and I look up, and I'm on the alcohol aisle, right? But what if that happens to a person? They make a mistake and they turn down the alcohol aisle and they look up and they see a bottle of wine, and then they say, "Oh, that looked like that would taste good." Man, that's some good looking stuff there. I think I might want to taste it, right? This is what he's thinking in his mind. Then he says, "Nah, I ain't doing that. Allah prohibited that." And he moves on. He leaves the aisle, and he leaves and goes about his business. Did he just commit a sin? No. Huh? Actually, he gets a reward. He actually gets a reward. So not only is it not a sin, he's rewarded for that behavior. Meaning he had a desire to do what Allah is displeased with. He wanted to do it, but he said, "I fear Allah." And he moved on. He didn't do it because he feared Allah. That is actually a good deed. That's actually a good deed. And so people need to understand that they are human. And it will help you go very far in your path, in your road that you're walking to righteousness, if you just are honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself, you can help yourself, because there are people who put themselves in very dangerous situations because they're not honest with themselves. I'll give you an example. A person who is fitna, for example, is money. Well, let's say he's a thief. He likes money, and he likes to steal it. He doesn't necessarily need, but he just sees stuff and he likes to steal it. But he tells himself, "I don't steal. I don't even like to steal." Right? So what does he do? He puts himself in a situation where a brother says, "Listen, Akhi, I need you to house sit for me. Can you stay at my house for the weekend? I have to go away. I have some cats and I have some birds, and I don't want them to die. I don't have anyone to take care of them. I can't take them with me. I don't have anyone who wants to take care of them. So can you stay at my house? Can you stay at my house and just, feel free to eat the food, and so you can sleep in the guest room. I just ask you, just don't go into my bedroom, and just feed the cats and the birds." He says, "Yeah, I'll do that." Now, why would you do that? Knowing that if you were honest with yourself, you would know that you like to steal, just because it's just something in you that you can't stop stealing. But when you tell yourself that that's not me, that's not how I think, that's not a behavior of mine, then you put yourself into a circumstance where now you end up stealing. All because you weren't honest with yourself. Because when you're honest with yourself, you can protect yourself from putting yourself in scenarios and situations where you're going to be tempted. And so, all in all, I say that I remember back in 2010. It was 2010, maybe 13 years ago. I did a lecture on this subject about being honest with yourself and loving yourself for who you are. Loving all of you. Accepting who you are and loving who you are. Because I was noticing people having self-esteem issues, right? And so I was doing a talk on the issue of loving yourself, accepting who you are, and loving who you are. And so after the lecture, some people had got mad at me. They said, "So you're telling me that I'm supposed to love the fact that I sin?" I said, "No, that's not what I said at all. I said you have to accept who you are and love you, right? Now, your sins, your desires are your desires. You do have to accept that. And you do have to love who Allah created you to be. That will help you elevate and have power over those above those desires. Right? Because you are a person who wants to fear Allah. Anyway, in order to get there, in order to get to that place where you are actually fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're able to have sabr, to restrain yourself from practicing disobedience, the first thing you have to do is you have to admit certain truths about yourself. You have to admit certain truths about yourself, and then from there, you're able to move on. From there, you're able to heal. From there, you're able to conquer and overcome. But if you're a person who's stingy, you're a person who's stingy, and you never admit that to yourself. You never say I'm stingy, but you're stingy. You'll never get over that. Because you can't admit the fact that you're stingy, you'll never be able to address the issue. You'll never deal with the issue straight up. And so you'll never be able to practice sabr, that restraint, because you can't even admit that there's something that you need to restrain. Does that make sense? That makes sense? If you can't admit, if you can't tell yourself the truth about who you are, then you'll never realize that there's something to even restrain to begin with. So you'll never practice sabr. You'll be stingy. You'll be a liar. You'll be somebody who doesn't pray. You'll be somebody who doesn't fast. The whole time you're telling yourself, oh, I'm okay and I'm good. The reality of the matter is you're not good. You're not good. But that's okay. It's okay to be not good. Because okay, now we know the starting point. I'm not good. I'm stingy. I don't like to pray. I don't like to fast. I don't like this. I don't like that. Okay. This is the starting point. What am I working with? This is what I'm working with. It's not much, but it is some. All right, this is my starting point, and I'm going to grow from here. I'm not telling you that you have to come to the minbar and announce it to the community. You don't go on social media, make a Facebook post or a tweet about this, that. But you look in the mirror, you tell yourself certain truths about yourself. As Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he used to say, "Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu." Bring yourselves to account before you're brought to account. Bring yourself to account. I'm this, and I'm this. That's who I am. Okay. Now, how do I work with this? How do I fix this? Or if it can't be fixed, if I can't change it, because this is who I am, then what do I do? How do I move forward? What's my solution? Okay, until I get the strength to overcome my alcohol addiction or my drug addiction, I'll stop hanging out with the people who are doing these things. That's my first step. I have friends, John, Tyrone, Marcus, or Chad, or whoever, Brad. These are the people who I'm with. I do these things. So my first step is I need to change my environment. Right? I'm still not there where I'm strong enough to actually just leave it alone. But at least now I know that this is a problem for me, so I need to avoid it. So I need to avoid these people. That's step number one. Step number two. Step number three. And every time, I accomplish one of these steps, I get stronger. And I'm able to restrain myself just a little bit more. Every day it's a process and it's a journey. Every day it's a process and it's a journey. And I get just a little bit more righteous every step that I take. And I'm not comparing myself to other people, because everybody has their own individual journey. My journey is not your journey. My desires aren't your desires. And my judgment's not going to be your judgment. So my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I can't compare myself. And I'm not going to compare myself to you or to him or to her. This is my journey. And so a sabr requires this is all the process, the refining process of practicing sabr, which is why it's so important. Fasting in Ramadan is so important. And if you remember last year or last Ramadan, when we discussed the issue of sins and the fact that sins break your fast, right? We talked about this every year. That person who sins, intentionally sins, while knowing that he's fasting in the daytime of Ramadan, there's an opinion of some of the ulama that actually breaks your fast in the same way that if a person was to eat or drink knowingly, intentionally in the daytime in Ramadan, right? And we mentioned there's opinion. It's a very strong opinion. It's a very, very strong position. And I lean towards it, even though it's very difficult to say that this is the haqq. But I do lean towards this, and I try to practice it. And I call others to practice it. Last Ramadan, we actually challenged people, for the first week, try to practice this. Practice fasting as though intentionally sinning, any sin, major or minor sin, any sin will break your fast. The same way that you avoid drinking water when you're thirsty or you're eating food when you're hungry, avoid sin the same way and see how that changes your fast. See how it changes your perspective on siyam and your perspective on the level of sabr that it requires in order to fast properly. And then you'll start to notice, like, wow, now I see why the fasting people have a gate in Jannah just for them. Because fasting isn't as easy as we thought it was. Because it's not about just staying away from food and drink. Because when you add that extra element of avoiding sins while believing that sin is going to break your fast, that adds another layer to your level of sabr that you have to have, which is why Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu and others from the Sahaba, when they used to fast, they used to stay in the masjid. Whenever they were fasting, they come pray Fajr in the masjid, and they wouldn't leave. Because at that time you couldn't, there were no phones or computers, iPads and stuff. You couldn't really sin in the masjid. There's nothing to really get into. All you could do was worship in the masjid. It was their fasting day. They would come to the masjid. Why? Because they understood what fasting meant, the level of sabr that is required in order to practice that. It's a training session. The training is the type of training, the training of the soul, to be able to avoid the desires, to have power over yourself. When you can overcome, when you can control yourself, you can stay away from drink when you're thirsty. You can stay away from food when you're hungry. Right? You can avoid sin when you want to. That shows you that you have a level of control over yourself, so that the rest of the year you can continue practicing that self-control, which that's a sabr. Sabr is that self-restraint, controlling yourself from saying or doing that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is sabr. And then Al-Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, he mentioned some ayat, and he mentioned a lot of ahadith. He mentioned a lot of ahadith. Sometimes Imam An-Nawawi rahimahullah, in a chapter he'll mention a few evidences and he'll move on. And then other chapters he goes extensively into the evidences that support the chapter. This is one of them. This is one of the chapters where An-Nawawi rahimahullah really mentioned a lot of evidences, and that shows the importance of this chapter. Because from here, from the foundation of sabr, it really branches out so many aspects of the religion of Al-Islam. So many aspects of Al-Islam, practicing Islam, branches out from sabr. You can't really practice what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered in the way that Allah has ordered it unless you have sabr. Unless you have sabr. You cannot enter into this religion in its entirety as Allah has commanded unless you have a sabr. And so this subject is an extremely important subject. And I advise myself, I advise all of us to take a look at this chapter, to go over it, think about the evidences that have been mentioned in it, and to implement them into our daily lives. I want to stop here, inshallah, because this is what we're able to accomplish for the evening. Will end our sessions in Riyaddus Salihin. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to benefit from what we've heard. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us and put it in the mizan of our hasanat. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us of our sins and overlook our faults. Does anybody have any questions?